Hi, I'm Patricia Maslin of Millwall No One Likes Us Talking Broadcasting. You're about to listen to two of my colleague panellists on our Millwall fan show, Gary Starr and Jeff Burnige. Jeff is interviewed by Gary as he recounts his memories of 12 players of great interest during the past 45 years. This covers the period that Jeff was a member of the Millwall board for 22 years. This first episode focuses on who wore the blue and white: Teddy Sheringham, Neil Harris, Brian Horne, Danny Shittu, Steve Morison and Phil Walker, with whom the story concludes in this first episode. Enjoy.
Not everybody likes them, but they don't care.
Hi, and welcome to this special No One Likes Us Talking podcast. I'm Gary Staff. I'm here with the Millwall legend that is Jeff Burnige. Jeff has been a Millwall supporter all of his 72 years, of which he spent 22 as a director of the club he loves. During his time, he's had a few highs and lows, the standout lows being leaving the board and being relegated from League One. The highs include helping guide the team to Division 1, the FA Cup final, and Neil Harris's return goal at Watford. Welcome, Jeff.
Good evening, Gary. Good evening, everybody.
So, this podcast, we're going to be discussing 12 Millwall players. We're going to do something a little bit different, that Jeff has an association with these players during his time at the club. And this week we're going to do 6, and next week we're going to do 6. This week we'll be discussing Teddy Sheringham, Neil Harris, Brian Horne, Danny Shittu, Steve Morison, and the great Phil Walker. So, Jeff, let's get started with Teddy.
Well, Gary, I haven't chosen the best 12 players I've seen in my time. We've tried to mix it up a bit, and I think there's something of interest in the players I've chosen. I may have a story or two about some of them. So, but I think we have to start with Teddy.
We do
don't
indeed.
You?
Yeah. Teddy Sheringham, our second highest Millwall top goal scorer with 11. 113 goals, I think it is. Teddy joined us in 1984 and stayed with the Lions for 7 seasons before moving on to Nottingham Forest for a snip at $2 million, where a certain Brian Clough used to call him Edward, if I remember rightly. Teddy was part of the infamous team that played in the top flight of English football for 2 seasons. So tell me what you know about Teddy, Jeff.
Well, the 1984 date, that's when he signed a professional contract, I think, or possibly when he made his debut. But he was a player who played for Essex Schools as a midfield player. He wasn't given a scholarship anywhere or an apprenticeship as it was in those days. And I think he was playing for the youth team at Leytonstone and Ilford, if I'm not mistaken. That's an interesting thing because that's where a certain Terry Hurlock played as well. I don't think at the same time. But Teddy came to us. It was one of the signings of Bob Pearson, who I hope we'll talk a bit about this evening. My memory of Teddy is that we saw him, we decided to put him in, he trained with us, and in those days the South East Counties League, which was the youth team league, we actually had 2 teams, an under-18 team and under-17 team in Division 2 of the South East Counties League, and we played a game over at the Metro Gas ground under what is now the O2. That area of London was completely derelict at the time. It made Docklands look posh. It was it was all gasboard land, and when they built on that, they had a major job of decontaminating that soil. I remember going to that game, and the guy that was coaching that team was a really excellent coach. But, you know, my theme would be that not all coaches make good judges of young players. And not all judges of young players can coach to save their lives. This is a good example. I remember that Bob and I went down to watch that game, and at half-time, Bob went over to the coach and said, "Take him off." And we took him off at half-time, and afterwards the coach came over and said, "Yes, I won't be having him next week, will I, Bob?" And Bob said, "No, you won't." And there was a pause, and he said, "The reason you won't be having him is he'll be in the under-18 team next week, so don't worry about that." But I remember that clearly. And That was my first introduction. It was the first time I'd ever seen him play, in fact. So that's a little story. And then, of course, he made rapid progress. And during George Graham's last season, which was, I think, 85-6, wasn't it?
It was.
He got himself into the side. I remember him scoring one really good goal when he was, at this stage, he's 18. And George didn't appear to really fancy him. Not being unfair to George, but his attitude was always, why would I take a chance on a young player? I'm here to get results and get my reputation up, and I want players I know what they're going to do. So he didn't really select many of the young players who formed the basis of the successful team that came after he left. People like Macca and Keith Stevens, Teddy, one or two others that had played, but not very much. And what happened was that we sent Teddy out. George didn't really fancy him. Bob got on very well with George, but he had to prove himself because, for obvious reasons, really. And he went on loan to Aldershot, aged 18. Didn't do an awful lot. I did go and see him play one of those games myself. And then he came back, and I remember Bob came to me. I think it was to me. It was, and said, there's a bit of a problem. George doesn't fancy him, wants to let him go at the end of the season. What do you want to do, Bob? Well, it's wrong. George is wrong. He can't see it. Teddy hasn't got a lot of pace, but this is a diamond in the making. I've got a plan, though. And I said, what's the plan? He said, well, Dave Bassett takes some young players over to Sweden to play over there because their season runs like March till November. He said, I'm going to send Teddy out on loan to the Swedish club, and then he'll be out of sight, out of mind. By the time he comes back, he'll be a different boy, a more mature player, and we'll take it from there. That's
that
what
Swedish
happened.
club, Jeff, was called Djurgården.
Djurgården, yeah.
Djurgårdens, that's what they're called.
I think it was. I don't remember exactly. I think it was Djurgården.
Yeah.
They were a second division team in Sweden anyway.
Yeah.
So he came back, and I think George, very good manager. I think he had a word with Bob and said, look, I know what you've done, but you were right. I can see it. And Ted had a few games that season and started the legendary 86-7 season in the team, as you know.
He did indeed, and as I say, the rest is history from that team onwards.
Well, in that first season, after Reg Burr and myself and Brian Mitchell bought the club in July 1986, Teddy was part of the plans. Bob had wanted to get John Doherty as manager, which he managed to do. And Ted played up front with another young youth team player, Michael Marks, who in fact was a local boy, a Bermondsey lad, a Millwall fan, got a hat-trick in one game. But we wanted to sign another striker to go with Teddy. And one idea at the time was to bring Kevin Bremner back. That didn't materialise. But the one they really all wanted was Cascarino. And I remember people in our crowd saying, oh, 2 6'2" lads, they both want to be the number one target. You'll never get that to work. And I must say, from memory, it didn't immediately click. I think it took half a dozen games or so. But in the end, it clicked big time. And they were a great combination. They could read each other like two open books. And it was almost unique. Defences did not know what to do because they could not put their big centre half on one and think the other one's a through runner or whatever. So that was the way that partnership came together.
Ingenious at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was clever. But Teddy was an incredibly intelligent footballer. He had a football brain, and that's why all the players that played up front with Teddy looked world beaters. It wasn't a coincidence, in my opinion. It's probably what got Cass his big move.
Yep.
Teddy was bought by Forest, by Brian Clough, to play with who? To play with Brian Clough's son. And Nigel got goal after goal that season and got his move to Liverpool. Then later in his career, Teddy played with a variety of partners at Man United. And at Tottenham, he teamed up with Jurgen Klinsmann, who has said many times what a brilliant partner Ted was. And of course, for England, it was Sheringham and Shearer. Same again. So that says everything about Teddy, in my opinion.
It does. It also, he had a bit of loyalty to us as well at the start, didn't he? Because I know we went down that season, but he signed a contract to stay with us for one more season after we went down, didn't he? And saw it out as well.
I don't remember if it was signing another contract, but he didn't agitate to move, which certain others did. Certain other players, the new manager, Bruce Rioch, did not want around. I think people can probably work out who I mean.
Yeah.
Anyone that would stand up to Bruce in the dressing room was on a sticky wicket. Teddy Spade, I think he got something ridiculous, like 37 goals in the season. I think he may have got more than one hat-trick that season. But at the end of the season, when we failed in the playoffs, many Millwall fans will remember that awful game in the semi-final of the playoff at Brighton.
Brighton, yes, 4-1 away. And sitting in the Goldstone ground at the top. So
Teddy was on his way.
Yeah.
On his way to England glory. So
he was indeed.
Well, I want to just say before I go off, Teddy, that I've mentioned how many highs and lows you get being an avid Millwall fan, and particularly having the privilege of being on the board for so many years. But I can remember his under-21 cap for England in Switzerland. I went to Switzerland just to watch my player, Teddy, playing an England shirt. I can't say I knew at that stage he'd end up playing 50 games for England first team. But it was great to see him that day. I got a feeling Alan McCleary played in the same game. I'll have to look that one up. I'm sure that Millwall historians will correct me if I'm wrong. The other thing I would say to him is certainly some very good judges knew what they were doing. Why did Alex Ferguson want Teddy? Because he just had Eric Cantona leave. How do you replace Eric Cantona?
Well, you don't.
What you do is you go and sign Teddy Sheringham. That's what you do.
Exactly. Clever player.
Okay. I think that'll do on Ted.
Do on Ted. So next up is Mr. Neil Harris. Millwall's top goal scorer, 138 goals in all competitions, making 374 appearances over 2 spells as a player. Neil became Millwall manager in 2015 and steered the club back to the Championship, 2 Wembley appearances and an FA Cup quarter-final. In 2019, he moved on to new grounds, but I think we'll all hold a place in our heart for Neil Harris, a legend, and I'm glad he's back under the bridge. Well,
very good scripting by yourself here, Gary. We started off with Teddy, who was the highest ever goal scorer for Millwall, and you've come up with Neil, who's the one that overtook him.
Yeah.
But Neil, I suppose people would like to know the truth of how he came to sign for us. This is one of those stories of mine where it's possible that other people involved will have a different take on it, but I'll tell you my take. He was playing for Cambridge City. He was seen by one of my youth scouts who I'd recruited, who was a postman at the time, and now has a senior position on the scouting staff at Manchester United.
Oh, wow.
That's a man called Mark Anderson. He saw Neil and strongly recommended him. The manager at the time was Billy Bonds, whose chief scout was Ronnie Boyce, and who didn't have a lot of time for Bob. We turned him down. But later in the season, Mark said to Bob, "Look, please come and watch him again with me, Bob, because I know I'm right." And Bob did, and ended up going and watching him 3 more times. The last time being on a filthy night, Tuesday night, somewhere like Rothwell Colliery in the Southern League, Midland Division, awful night. But what happened was that during that season at Cambridge City, Liverpool took an interest in Neil, and they had agreed a deal with Cambridge City that if they signed Neil after a trial, they would pay $100,000. That was big money for a non-league club in those days. It was big money for us. I don't think at that stage we never paid that for a player, but I'll have to think about that one. And Bob went to the first trial game. He played for Liverpool reserves against somebody. I can't remember who it was against. I didn't go. And Bob came back, and I remember saying to him, "How did he do?" He said, "No, he'll do for us." And I've seen him play for Liverpool reserves. I've now seen him play in the Southern League for Cambridge City. But I've got a feeling Liverpool won't sign him, because we are talking about Liverpool, possibly the best team in Europe at the time, and they'll be looking for something that can go straight in their side within a year. Neil was 20 at that point, and the second time he said, "Go on, come with me, I don't fancy the drive." And we drove, I think it was to Chester's old ground in that game as a second game for Liverpool. We got there, and he played him on the right wing. And Bob elbowed me and said, they won't sign him, because he's not a right winger. And I'm trying to cut this story reasonably short for you, Gary, but
no, it's fine. Keep going.
We got on to. I think we left that one to Bob to do the talking to Cambridge City. It certainly wasn't Billy or Ronnie Boyce, or Theo, but who by that time had become chairman, if I'm not mistaken. And Bob, I remember saying to me, "We can't afford $100,000, can we?" I said, "No." He said, "My valuation is $25,000," and he said, "We'll have to just sit on our offer and make them sweat," because in those days, Gary, the transfer deadline, the transfer window we've got now didn't exist. And you could sign players all through the season at any time, but you couldn't sign them to play in your team after the second week in March, roughly, because it stopped you from signing players for your promotion run-in or your title run-in or your anti-relegation run-in. And he said the week of that transfer deadline, if they haven't got a deal, they'll come on to us. We've just got to be patient. But to do the deal, can he go to 30? Theo agreed, and we went back on. They came back onto us on the deadline day or the day before, and Bob said, "No, it's 25,000." They said, "Oh, can't you increase it a bit?" And he said, "I'll tell you what. Can you promise me you'd take it if I can get the board to approve 30? "Yeah, okay." And that's what happened.
Yep.
I think there might have been a couple of add-ons, which we might have ended up paying. So, but I'm afraid I've forgotten now. That's how Neil came to join us. And, of course, he was only 20 when that happened. People forget that. And he went into a side which was possibly Bob's second or third great side that we signed, because we went to that Auto Windscreens final. Some of the senior players that had played most of that season didn't get to play in that game because we had decided Rhino and Maka had become the management team, which was wonderful. Two great Millwall legends in their own right. And both of them had been signed by Bob, so they were a good trio. And they decided, we got to Wembley, we got to the semi-final, we played Walsall. Many Millwall fans will remember that magnificent evening. And
I was there.
They decided,
brilliant game of football that was.
Yeah, the chance to get these young players the experience of a semi-final and then a Wembley game, it will do them so much good, which is why we ended up going into that final with Richard Sadlier, Paul Ifill, Neil himself, Stephen Reed, Tim Cahill. I think there's another couple in there somewhere as well. And I'm afraid a few noses were put out of joint that didn't get to start in that game. So keen were they to bring Richard Sadlier back. He was actually playing for an Ireland underage team in Malaysia, if I remember, and we actually flew him back the day before the final because it was considered so important to give him the experience of doing that. And so that's how Neil came to come to us. And I must say, he would be right up there for me as a Millwall legend, a hero. Who can possibly forget his comeback game after the dreadful diagnosis of testicular cancer that day at Watford when he came back in the team and scored that goal at Watford? Do you remember that one, Gary?
I was at the ground. Was you there?
Yeah, cool. Well, who's going to miss that? My entire family were there.
Yeah.
We all loved Neil. Both my daughters were with me. My wife was with me. Everyone
remember
seen
right,
that iconic photograph.
Sorry, yes, of course, the iconic photo, yeah.
Of course. And we're wearing green, if you remember. Very strange.
We were. And I remember rightly, he was just sent on for the last 10 minutes. He wasn't even expected to play, was he? They just said we were 3-1 up. Go and play the last 10 minutes. He picked the ball up on the left wing, wasn't it? Run 40 yards and just put it over the top of the keeper. Yeah,
I mean, it was a magic moment. I must say, look, the current manager is doing a really good job. One of the best managers we've ever been able to attract to Millwall. I think that Neil deserves the credit for having set the club up and the team up with full of character and strong individuals. I think it was a great legacy to hand to Gary Rowett. And much as everyone wants to give Gary the credit, there's an element of our fans that want to downplay what Neil did. They mustn't forget that 2 years ago we came 8th in the Championship with 72 points on his first season up after getting us promoted. It was a little bit sad that an element of our crowd turned on Neil. It did revolve around the style of play which he was slow to develop and which he has developed a little bit more at Cardiff. But as far as I'm concerned, Neil Harris, all-time legend, yeah. I'll always be grateful to Neil.
About Neil Harris, and I think he comes out of since the beginning of 2018, 2019, these last 2 seasons, I saw a stat. He is, with obviously Mill games and Cardiff games, he is third out of the most wins as a manager in our division. I think Bielsa and I can't think who was top are out there as well. But he was third, and I think Mr. Gary Rowett was 5th. So just show, and look what he's done with Cardiff this year. It just shows he has got the nous as a manager, probably ran out of ideas, and as you say, those crowd that turned on him, he just probably thought, do you know what? I've taken this club, I've put it on good footing, let someone else take it to the next stage.
I think that's how he felt. I think he knew that the cornerstone of Neil's time as manager was, I've got to reunite the team and the crowd, was what he always said. We need players here in the team that will understand it's their job to get the crowd going, not the crowd's job to get the team going. Sometimes the team have got to get the crowd going. Yep. And he wanted players in the team that would revel in playing for a Millwall shirt, and for a Millwall crowd. And that's something which has been the basis of that team, which is still the case now. Yep. His second season up, the one where we struggled to stay up, it wasn't pretty, but we went into that season with Steve Morison and Lee Gregory as the front two, and Steve was very much on the wane, wonderful player. Lee Gregory wasn't scoring possibly as frequently as we wanted him to, and we did struggle for alternatives to those two that season. Who did we sign that was never fit? Might have been Bradshaw.
Oh, it was Bradshaw. It was Bradshaw.
Yeah.
It was his first season.
And of course, he was injured almost immediately, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think it was at Forest. He come on. I think he scored 2. Then about the next game, he just started to find his feet, and then he got himself injured.
That time from January onwards, to the end of the season, would have been very difficult for. I mean, our supporters, we didn't enjoy that half season at all.
When you think that season as well, though, we got to the FA Cup quarter-finals.
We did, but I think Neil's mindset was, Millwall's my club. I'm not letting this team get relegated. And I think he played anti-relegation football right through to the end of that season. But as far as I'm concerned, the man's a complete legend. If Millwall can't make the playoffs, which we now know we can't, quite frankly, I don't feel anything other than proud that Neil, it looks almost certain, has got, and by the time this goes out, we'll know, but I think he's got Cardiff into the playoffs. So, well done, Neil.
So, as a man, what's he like as a man? Just a quick 1 minute on that. Obviously, you know him a little bit more personal than people do. Is he a good lad as well? And does he still have Millwall in his heart? Oh, well, that's a silly question, really, isn't it?
I think he was. I was involved in that signing. Obviously, I was involved in bringing him back to the club as well for a second spell as a player. As a man, the absolute tip top. I mean, that team that he built on very little in the way of resources, they were gutted when he left the club. But all I can tell you that sums up Neil for me is that he realised that combination of getting the crowd and the team completely on the same page, that had hit the skids, and he took responsibility for that and felt that there's no way I want to ever be creeping out the door at Millwall. I'll go now at a time of my own choosing. If you remember, his last game, we conceded a last-minute goal at Luton.
Yes,
if you remember. I think that was right. He got a bit of a rough handling from the away fans behind the goal. I think his mind was nearly made up already, I suspect, but I think that finished it off. I think he thought, no, the crowd are not behind me as much as I want them to be, and I deserve them to be. My time's come.
I actually thought the time was a bit strange because Leeds was next. And I thought he might have, or unless he didn't want that Leeds to because they were playing so well at the time, to be his now when he's coughing against Leeds. And he thought, you know what, I'll give someone else that privilege and the team can fight for me another way.
I didn't speak to him at the time. I was really, really gutted when he did resign. It wasn't 100% shock because I could see in his body language that he wasn't happy. He was not happy. And I don't think the fact that Leeds was the next game entered into his head. I think he probably went to Luton thinking, I think my time's come. And when he got the reception after the Luton game that he got, that's a game we should easily have won.
Yeah.
When that happened, I don't think he thought about who we were playing on the Saturday. I really don't.
Fair enough.
But yeah, always a legend in my eyes. I think he's one of those people that, as years go by, people will forget things that they thought at the time, and he'll be celebrated right up there. Great man, very good manager, a career that could have gone much higher if he hadn't had that dreadful testicular cancer. It took a half a yard off him in pace, and there you are.
Well,
Sir Neil, in my opinion.
Still managed to score more goals in his second stint with us as well. So let's move on to another one of the infamous top flight team, Mr. Brian Horne, who I believe is still around the club. Brian played 196 games for us, which I didn't realise he played that many, over 6 seasons for the Lions. Was also, as a really highlight of his career, was the saving of the penalty away to Bournemouth that helped us seal Millwall's promotion to the top flight. Probably too young to be at away games then, when I was when time for me, but I'm sure you were there, Jeff.
I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget it. And that was the night that it finally, the penny dropped, not just with me, but with our crowd. The penny dropped that night. Do you know what? I think we're going to get in the First Division.
Yeah.
It was a thrill to be there. But what we've done with the 3 players we've taken first, all 3 of those owe their presence at Millwall to Bob Pearson. In the second 3, we'll move on to other players, possibly from a different era. But Brian was a young Millwall fan, wanted to be a Millwall player, lived in Essex, quite a way out, had to really go through it to come to training. But he wasn't the tallest, as everyone knows, but I'll tell you what he was. He was the bravest. I've yet to see a keeper as brave as Brian Horne, ever. Absolutely unbelievable the way he threw himself right into people's boots all the time, and mentally brave as well. Bob thought a lot of him, and it was his idea to put Horne in the team. We started the 86-7 season with Paul Sansom, another very good goalkeeper, in the team.
My first goalkeeper I remember.
Bob was itching to get Horne in the side. Aged 18, for a goalkeeper, that's incredibly young. That rarely happens that a goalkeeper goes in the side that age. And we're talking about the equivalent of today's championship. That wasn't just, down the leagues. That was, and his first game was at Sheffield United, and we lost the game 2-0, and he made a mistake for one of the goals. And I thought, well, that's it. He's come in for one game. He'll be taken out the side for a while now. And it was John Docherty, someone also that should go down in Millwall history. I'm told that he went in the dressing room at the final whistle. Horne's head was in his hands. He was slumped on his seat, and he went, "Don't know why you're feeling like that, Horne. You're playing Saturday. You're still in the team." And
Brilliant.
so it was an instant pickup, and of course, you never look back. One little story about Horne. He was very highly rated, and Arsenal were going on a youth tour somewhere in Europe. Can't remember where. Cannot remember where they went. But they asked us through official channels, can we take Brian Horne on that tour, under 21 tour, I think, or it might have been a youth tour. Can't remember. We decided that it'd be wrong to not let him go, but knowing the lad, he wanted to play for Millwall. It wasn't a problem. It's not many players would you let do that. So we decided that, and we said to Arsenal, he can go on the tour. He has to wear Millwall socks in games, and he has to wear a Millwall tie, not an Arsenal tie. Other than that, he's an Arsenal player for that tour. You'd have to check that with Horne. I'm sure I got that right. Moving on to that game at Bournemouth, it was the penalty save was in front of the end that Millwall fans were in.
I think Erlock scored in that game as well, didn't he? He scored
he scored a brilliant goal where he burst through. I mean, you see that on YouTube. Recommend everyone to go and look at that. I think he played a 1-2 with somebody, burst onto the ball. I think Alan McCleary it might have been. I'm not absolutely sure.
Yeah.
And he hit an absolute monster goal. I think that was at the end where our fans were, because we all went mental. And then they got this penalty quite late on, Bournemouth, and Horne saved it. And I remember, I don't know whether it went, I don't know how it happened, but when the ball was dead, he turned round to the Millwall fans and gave it the, the real big one. And that was a special night. I knew in my heart of hearts it was ours to lose after that game.
Yeah.
And
we went
when
Hull, didn't we? Was it Hull and Kevin O'Callaghan?
Yeah.
Was he?
I don't think it was the last but one game. I think we had a home game with Stoke. I remember Lou Macari was the manager, and I remember his press conference afterwards, and he said, people got to wake up. This is the team that's going to win this division. They're the best team in the division. And I thought, that's good.
Nice thing to say, especially a man of Lou Macari's standing. Yeah,
I mean, that was an amazing thing to be part of. That promotion in 1988. All I can tell you, Gary, is that when Reg Burr, Brian Mitchell and myself were lucky enough to buy the club in 1986, I remember doing what I always told myself I must never ever do if I ever got to be a co-owner of Millwall. That is, don't make any promises. But I got pinned against the wall in the car park at the old Den. What are you doing here? You got no money. We need a millionaire. And I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. I said, worst moment of my life, 1972, being denied at the very end for Millwall to be, for the first time in our history, be in the First Division. I'm telling you, I won't rest until Millwall get in the First Division. And 2 years later, less than 2 years later, there we were, and Horne was part of that. So another great guy, really great guy. Millwall, absolutely to his core. So, he's one of my all-time heroes. I'm glad I could talk about Horne.
Brilliant. Well, that was Brian Horne.
Hi, Bethany Warren here. You may have heard me as part of the Millwall No One Likes Us talking team, who form the fans panel of our Millwall fan shows. Not to worry if you haven't. Our Millwall fan shows is broadcast every Friday and can be listened to or downloaded on our social media links on Facebook and also Twitter, on Millwall No One Likes Us talking groups, or you can find us on Spreaker, iTunes and YouTube as well. full of topical news with views from the fans, pundit and players from the past on the show. Don't miss our Millwall fan show with the Millwall No One Likes Us talking team every Friday from 8 p.m.
So let's move on to a more recent figure. Definitely big in stature, and Mr. Danny Shittu. Danny joined us first on loan in 2010 for 3 months before signing a lot before them going back off to QPR for a season, who nabbed us off him, where he stayed. He then joined Mill back in 2012, where he stayed in the heart of the Mill defence for 3 years, which included a trip to the FA Cup semi-final against Wigan. Danny scored the only goal in the 1-0 win against Blackburn in the semi-final to get us... in the quarter-final to get us to the semi-final. Tell us how Danny come about.
Yeah, I mean, you've saved me a job of talking about Danny. They're the things that are very clear in my mind as well, Gary.
Yeah.
I still say that the first three players we mentioned, the common factor is recruitment and having somebody on the staff who was a natural, brilliant judge of a young player. That applied to those three that we've mentioned already. Bob gets a lot of credit for that. In those days, he was absolutely in his heyday. But recruitment has taken place since, and I just think it is, after the manager, it is the most important function in a club, a middle-sized club like ourselves. It's crucial that we have way above average performance on recruitment. Danny was not someone whose CV would immediately say to you, this is the player we got to sign. He had a few injuries. He had a few clubs. He played most of the season before he signed for us in the reserves. I think it was at Bolton. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it was Bolton.
What a fantastic combination it was. Danny was finally at the right club, although he did play more games for another London club than us. People know that. But the impact he made at Millwall was phenomenal, and that's what we do. Do you remember that?
Yes,
that's
indeed.
What we do. And he's a natural leader, a big character, a big guy. I absolutely loved watching him play for Millwall. I really did. Can't tell you how he came to sign for us. I wasn't closely involved at the time, but a great bit of recruitment. I'd always liked him as a player. I first saw him play as as a 17-year-old. In the build-up to the 1998 World Cup, I couldn't get the tickets that I wanted to watch England. I think England were in that 98 World Cup. So I joined the Nigeria Supporters Club.
France?
Hmm?
Would have been France, yeah.
I joined the Nigerian Supporters Club, which was based in southeast London, to get tickets.
Excellent.
Right, and the last game that the Nigerian squad played before leaving the UK, they played Sierra Leone at Hendon Football Club. That's no longer a football ground. Just off the North Circular, if anyone knows their non-league. And he played in that game, but he was 17. It was, making up the numbers. They hadn't brought players over from Nigeria to play. I don't think it was European and UK-based players. It was a kind of a practice game. And I remember then, do you know what? I can see something in him. But he ended up having a false start because he was big and cumbersome at 17. Hadn't really developed into the athlete he needed to be. And I think he was at Watford. And then, of course, he signed for Charlton, which I didn't really enjoy. So later on in life, when he signed for Millwall, I was over the moon. And I can still remember those goals, his smile, his rapport with the Millwall fans, a natural leader. And it's a shame he wasn't with us at a time when we were going for a promotion or what have you. What did he do, Gary? Did he play in... I remember him being Player of the Year, and I remember those cup games. You mentioned Blackburn. Did we not beat Villa earlier in that cup run?
We did, and I do believe wasn't that Ben May? Or was it Ben May or someone like that scored? Or no, it wasn't. It was. He's now at He's now at Portsmouth. What's his name? The young kid up front.
No, that's gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That's gone out of my head. Look, people will have to forgive me. I have seen many. I reckon I've seen thousands of Millwall games. And
but one point I wanted to make, though, Jeff, just thinking back how big a character Danny Shittu was. When you look back over Millwall centre-backs over the years, you can go Stuart Nethercott, larger-than-life character. Danny Dichio, larger-than-life character, who come in and do like a job for a couple of seasons. Richard Shaw, Danny Shittu, and now look, we've got one in our back four at the moment, or back five, Piercy. Just big, larger-than-life characters who are coming to the end of not end of their careers, but look at that August of their careers, autumn of their careers, that want to do a good job for a club like us to secure. Unfortunately, I don't think Piercy will be around next season. That's my own personal view, because I think we'll move on to maybe younger and different players. But you can see we've always had that type of player there to bring the team forward.
Well, I think when we've been in a phase when we were making rapid progress, like the 86 to 90 team, like the team that got to the Ultra Windscreens final, like those two teams in particular, I think Millwall have been successful. We haven't had to rely on signing someone for the last 2 years of their lives, of their careers. But it is true that when the club are struggling to put together a successful and progressive team, a team that's going to improve, you have to get those signings right. And one of them was Danny, and he captained us. He took over the captaincy when Paul Robinson got injured. If I'm not mistaken, I'm sure there'll be others listening to this that will correct me. I'm really, really glad we saw something of Danny Shittu in a Millwall shirt, and I know that it was quite late in his career. I don't think he did anything after. I think that was his retirement in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And he was Kenny Jackett's captain. I think Kenny was the one that brought him to the club permanently. Great captain, great character. I've spoken to him a few times since he's left, and he absolutely loved bringing his career down when he had such an unbelievable rapport with the crowd of the team he was playing for. So, Danny Shittu, legend.
Yeah, larger-than-life character. So let's move on to another larger-than-life character, Mr. Steve Morison. Steve, over 3 stints with Millwall, 2 as fully signed and 1 as loan, scored 75 goals for the club, and he's the 3rd top goal scorer. So we've done 1, 2, 3 here, Jeff, at the club. Steve's highlights include scoring the goal at Wembley, which I've probably watched more than any other goal of Millwall's in my time, that put us back to the Championship where we currently remain. Thoughts on Steve, Jeff?
I was thrilled when we signed him. Interesting career. He got signed. He's an Enfield boy, a North London boy, and I didn't see him play at that stage, but he got signed as an apprentice at Northampton. I think he even made his debut at 17. Colin Calderwood took over as manager, and at 20, I think I may have read this. They must have had financial problems, because Colin Calderwood offered him a 3-month contract to prove himself. He was 20 and he'd been in the first team. And in the end, that was it. And he went and played non-league at Bishop Stortford, legendarily, scored unbelievable number of goals there, and then went on to Stevenage. And while he was in 3 years at Stevenage, which was non-league at the time, FA Trophy semi-final, FA Trophy final, FA Trophy final. So they weren't a bad team. And I think his last one, I think I'm right in saying, again, I'm sure the Statos will tell me if I'm wrong, I think in that side, Mark Beard was playing for Stevenage as well.
Interesting. And I think
I'm right.
Did he score a hat-trick in the final for Stevenage as well?
Don't remember. But I was lucky to have a brilliant seat, and I was right on the steps where they come up. And I remember Beardy seeing me, and we had a hug, and then Morison came past, and true to life, couldn't get a smile out of him, however hard you tried. But I think it was that summer that we signed him. I think by that stage he'd negotiated a new contract which had a buyout clause. No idea who his agent was, if he even had one, but we paid the 130 grand. It was a lot of money for a non-league player. Steve's gone down as a legend for me as well because, again, no problem for him understanding that it was his job to get the crowd on side, not wait for them to give him a bit of a cheer. He was made for a Neil Harris team. Yeah, I mean, a wonderful Millwall career. He had 3 seasons in the Wales national team under John Toshak and then Gary Speed. And for some reason, that came to an end. I don't quite know why that ended after 3 years, but he had that peculiar... We sold him to Norwich. He didn't do a hell of a lot up there. They did a swap deal, didn't they, with him to go to Leeds for Becchio. Do you remember Becchio that scored against us in a playoff?
I would have loved to have had Becchio at Millwall. It was one.
No, it wasn't my cup of tea.
No,
it wasn't my cup of tea. I'd have had Morison back any day. But Leeds fans don't rate him. But what they've forgotten is that he spent 18 months out of the team injured. He had 2 injuries while he was up there. Luckily for us, because it meant that he was kind of surplus to their requirements at the time.
Didn't he contact with Neil because they were friends and say, look, Neil, when you get management, or that was one of his first signings, wasn't it? Neil's first signing. They got back in contact and. I
don't know.
I'm
not going to claim to know something I don't know, but I know Neil fancied him really, really strongly. Really strongly. And I don't think they ever played together, did they? Yeah. So I don't know how we would have known him. I really don't know that one, but all I know is that he had a wonderful Millwall career. As you said, 3rd highest scorer after the two players we mentioned earlier. But we talked about magic moments. I mean, the promotion to the First Division at Hull, magic moment. That put us 7 points clear at the top of the division. Must never forget, we didn't just go up in the playoffs from the second tier. We absolutely breezed that division. We were 7 points clear, so far clear we could afford to take it easy on the last game. And we lost at home to Blackburn, which kept Palace from either staying up or something. Can't remember exactly what. Magic moment, Horne's magic moment, the penalty save at Bournemouth, Neil's magic moment, the goal at Watford, Morison's magic moment, you've already mentioned it. I mean, what a moment. 6 minutes to go. We'd failed to go up the previous year in the playoffs. We'd actually finished only 6th, I think. And what a moment. Lee Gregory involved with that as well, flicking it on.
Can I tell you my own personal story of that goal, Jeff?
Oh, please do. Go on.
I was not there. I was gutted. I was travelling to San Francisco that day. About 3 weeks before, I'd been told by my boss, you've got to go out to San Francisco for some training, etc. We were obviously I think at the time it was just before the Bristol Rovers game. So I'm thinking, brilliant, going to San Francisco. Then all of a sudden, the goal's gone in. I think I told you the story of I was walking around Spain when the Bristol Rovers game was on. And then I thought, hold on a minute, I'm going to be in bloody San Francisco. Thinking, oh my God. So I'm thinking to my boss, can I fly out on we played on the Sunday, I believe. Can I fly out on the Saturday or can I fly out on the Monday so I can at least watch or see the game if I can? Couldn't change it. So end up buying my niece and my dad really, really good Club Wembley tickets, and they were literally in the real comfy seats, go up on the escalator, that type of job. Really great seats. And I spent 9.5 hours on a flight to San Francisco not knowing the score. I tried to get Wi-Fi on the plane so I could listen to the game, everything. I'd phoned BA ahead of the game trying to find out if my plane had Wi-Fi. Nothing. So that was the worst 9.5 hours of my life. My wife still hates me for it because we flew out together, and she said literally I was going to wait until I got back to the hotel because I was getting a copy of the game somehow sent to me. But she said you were on edge the whole time, and literally as soon as it landed, her phone went beep beep, and she said, "Shall I tell you?" And she told me we'd won 1-0. Literally, I was standing in San Francisco Airport on my knees screaming.
Well, look, I've got a long memory of watching Millwall from the 1950s onwards, but I've talked about magic moments. I think all fans, the reason we stick with it when we've coming back from away games where we've lost, disappointments like the 72 failure to get in the First Division, losing that playoff the year before we got successful in the playoff. Did we not lose to Barnsley the year before, if I'm not mistaken?
This one, 3-1.
And that's my Morison moment. Again, it was scored at the end that the Millwall fans were in. And he wasn't a guy to show his emotions excessively, Morrow, but he ran over to those fans that were alongside the penalty area where he'd scored that goal, and he was in heaven. And the place went absolutely mental. It did. Funny enough, Gary, I think I'm right in saying they had a great chance to equalise in stoppage time.
They did.
But everyone forgets that. We've done it.
He should have crossed it, and he passed it. He tried to shoot, didn't he? He should have.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
But look, that was Morrow's moment. And I don't think he'll ever forget it, and I certainly won't. And I just feel sorry for you that you weren't there in person.
Indeed. Well, I believe he's now working alongside Mr. Harris, isn't he, at Cardiff?
Yes, that doesn't surprise me tremendously. I mean, Neil is a very, very loyal man. Most players that have played under him or with him just speak so highly of him. You saw what people said when he resigned as manager. It doesn't surprise me. I think he does quite well as a pundit on television. He's careful not to be too biased in favour of Millwall. He's quite objective. But, I mean, what's everyone Millwall fan will remember, Danny Shittu, smile all over his face. Brian Horne, smile all over his face.
Yeah.
Steve Morison, trying to get a smile out of him, not easy. But that was his character. And you know what? He did not like to settle for anything other than what had to be done. You know, I've seen that in some other players outside of Millwall that I admired. If I can divert onto when in 1996 I had can I call it an honour? I was the official FA host of the German team. Very awkward when they knocked us out in the semi-final. But what impressed me most, I watched every single training session they took part in for between 4 and 5 weeks. And Jurgen Klinsmann was the main striker. They had 4 strikers. Every training session finished with someone being press-ganged into doing crosses from right and left. And the 4 strikers would just finish. And I remember Klinsmann saying over and over again to the other players, if they hit the woodwork, if it went over the bar, he never once said, great strike. It was always hit the target. And he would never finish training until he'd hit the target, the last 2 or 3 strikes. So it was ingrained in his head.
Yeah.
And Morison's a bit like that, a real perfectionist with his game. I suspect he'd be quite hard on himself. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he makes out on the coaching side.
That's why I think in that last season where we almost got relegated, but Neil managed to keep us up, as you were saying earlier. I think he was getting frustrated with himself because he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't make those bursting 100-mile-an-hour runs into the box and do the chipping and stuff like that. He had to be clever, and he tried to be clever, and he did win us a few games coming on and being clever, but it was just that little couple of games too far, I think, and he even knew when he went, can't think where he went to in the end, but
Shrewsbury,
that was it. He knew halfway through that season, that was it. He'd give it a go, give it one last foray, as they say, and he knew.
Look, that season was a forgettable season. It was not a nice season to be watching as a Millwall fan. I know that Neil did not enjoy that season. His job was to keep us up. Morison played a big part in keeping us up, but his last magical moments, the one we've just described, that goal at Wembley, that was his swan song for me. Great moment.
Yeah, and it was the arrogance about him as well. Just to remember one more goal when we were in the playoffs the year before the Barnsley game, when we beat Bradford City 3-1 at their place, and the smugness of him when he scored that header at the Bradford end, just another goal that just epitomised what the man was.
Oh, and he was hard on himself, I suspect.
Yeah.
No.
Brilliant.
A different character, but yeah, I'm really, really pleased I saw his career at Millwall.
Indeed.
Who's next?
And last for today is Dear Phil Walker, signed in 1975 from Epsom and Ewell at the same time as Mr. Trevor Lee. Phil went on to make 146 appearances and 17 goals, and was notably one of the first ever Millwall black players. Tell us about him.
Well, he was the second ever, I think. The first one was a young lad called Frank Peterson, who was a brilliant centre forward, but a rogue, and that was a life totally unfulfilled. I don't know what happened to Frankie Peterson, but he was an amazing player in the late 60s. In those days, when we signed Phil and Trevor, in 1975, certainly large parts of the media were shocked at that signing. Two black players. The middle of the 70s was a time. It was not an easy time to be a black player in football. There weren't many around at the time, but typically, and I mean typically, the Millwall fans took to Phil and Trevor in a big, big way. They were young. I think they were 19 at the time. Do you know what? I think the previous season they'd still be playing Sunday League. I think they played for a Sunday League team in the Riverside League, I think it was called. I didn't know that. I didn't even go to the FA Vase final when I think they beat Hoddesdon at Wembley for Epsom and Ewell. They were both playing. How nobody picked them up for the league, I'll never know. I may have got that one wrong, Gary. I'm getting a bit senile, but how no one signed them then, I do not know. But Gordon Jago was having to completely rebuild the Millwall team. We'd had a great 70. That team that failed to get promoted in 72 was a marvellous team, really marvellous team. We had a few moments afterwards. We had the cup win at Everton and bits and pieces, but we were no longer a serious threat to go to the First Division. Gordon had to rebuild it, and the lucky thing for Phil and Trevor was that there was a team in the third tier, having just got relegated, and we weren't a strong team. And Gordon had the ability and the courage to put them both straight in the side. It was their first week. I don't know, they had a complete week's training. And he put them straight in the side, and we won that game. And Phil was a wonderful player. Those listeners who know all these players we've been talking about, Teddy, Morrow, Neil, they don't know what they missed in Phil Walker, because he was one of those players that he just glided over the field. His running action was the best. I can't remember a Millwall player with a better running action than Phil Walker. It looked effortless. He just glided across the field. He was a great passer of the ball, really good. and he was just at Millwall in the wrong era, because he would have gone on and been an all-time legend. What I would like to say, and I hope everyone can understand where I'm coming from, so much has been made in these times when society is largely celebrating the black players that came into football in the 70s. It was not easy for them. People like Clyde Best at West Ham, people like Howard Gale at Liverpool, they weren't all that numerous. But West Brom live on this idea that they had Cyril, Regis and Brendan Batson and Laurie Cunningham, the three amigos or whatever it was they called. That was 2 or 3 years after Millwall put Phil and Trevor in the side. And
I thought it was at the same time. I didn't realise it was that far after.
No, it was before. And because Gordon also wanted to sign Cyril Regis. He was playing for Molesey. Can you imagine? For Molesey. That's a story for another time. But that's Cyril Regis. But and I'm partly at fault for us not signing him. So I'll keep off that one. That'll probably have to be in the memoirs. But
just to
he went from Molesey to Hayes and then into the league. But Phil was just a wonderful player to watch. And I liked the kit we had in those days as well. It was that really royal blue shirts and white shorts. And there's some stuff on YouTube. Every now and then there'll be a big match revisited. And my eyes are glued to Phil Walker, a wonderful, wonderful player. The magic moment for Phil, there wasn't one. The magic performance for Phil was at Aston Villa, who were, I think, on their way to getting promoted. And Phil Walker totally ran that game from the centre of midfield. And I looked at it and thought, my God, what a player. And it all looked so effortless. Phil and Trevor did not have it easy. There was an element of football crowds in those days that did not make it easy, but all I can tell you is it did not take Phil and Trevor long to get the Millwall fans totally behind them. And in fact, if you look at it, Gary, Millwall fans have had their ups and downs in terms of how they've conducted themselves. Much of it has been a media confection. Not all of it has been. But Millwall fans have never had a problem with black players. In fact, How many times have we had Player of the Year elected that was? My recollection in 1975, 6, 7 was that Phil and Trevor were absolutely idolised. And talking to those two guys now, it is a really wonderful thing. Phil's a great coach. He runs his own soccer academy. He works closely with another London football club, which I think is a bit sad. But a great person. And sadly, I don't remember the circumstances, but in the end, because of financial reasons, he ended up being sold to Charlton, didn't he?
He did.
But all I can tell you about Phil, great guy, and a much, much better player than history currently records. He had injuries. He ended up moving to Portugal to play, and he played in Portugal till his mid to late 30s.
Yeah, Boa Vista, a very good side. 193.
Boa Vista, and then
Maya.
And then another team in the same area. I think they were called Maya, Maia. He played there for a few years. I don't think it was the most difficult standard. Phil will deny that. But, I got so much time for that guy. And as I say, if you could see him play, it looks so effortless. Who can you think of that made the game look so easy as he did? I tell you, don't laugh. He was the 1970s version of Kevin De Bruyne.
Wow.
He makes it look effortless, doesn't he, as well?
He does.
He makes the game look easy. Phil did. And he deserves a much better place in history than he's actually got. Anyway, that's Phil for me.
So, while we were chatting about Phil, did a bit of research on Frank Peterson. There is a little Wikipedia page about him. So Peterson progressed through Millwall's youth academy, becoming the first black player to ever play for the club. He made 3 appearances in the 1968-1970 era. He then moved on to Brentwood on loan before going to Chelmsford City for 13 seasons. Doesn't say how many appearances he made there, though. And then he went to Margate on loan, Romford, Hornchurch and Billy.
How many years was he at Chelmsford?
He was at Chelmsford from 1970 to 1983.
I don't think he played a huge number of games. I don't think... Look, God bless him. He was a very good player. He should have been better than... He should have had a better career, but he didn't like training, if I remember. He wasn't reliable. He was very good. The game came easy to him. He just wasn't dedicated to being a professional player. Got time for one little anecdote about Frankie playing in Millwall's youth team. I remember this was before Bob's day. This is in the late 60s. Charlie Vaughan was a name someone may remember. He was involved. I can't remember what his role was, whether he was youth team scout or... I've forgotten. I really have. I think Billy Neal was the manager, youth team manager at the time. And I remember Charlie Vaughan. Might have been Charlie, might have been George Stevens, can't remember. But I remember him telling me that went to pick him up and he rang the doorbell and no answer. Went back and sat in his car. The milkman came, put 2 pints of milk on the doorstep. George was thinking, I've got to go and knock on the door again. And when I knocked on the door again, still no answer. Went back to the car, got in the car, looked round. There's no 2 pints of milk had gone. So Frankie had waited till George's back was turned, whipped in the 2 pints of milk, and he never played in the game. So not meant to be a full-time professional player.
What a shame.
What a shame. He had a trouble. London boys of that age, in that era, I don't think he was completely free of trouble, and I don't think he was one of nature's innocents. They were tough times, and that's what one of the many should have been stories that there are hundreds of in football.
Yep.
And no other Millwall player played in our first team who was black until Phil and Trevor, which was like 6 or 7 years later.
Interesting. Well, Jeff, that has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you very, very much for your time today. Next week, we have got 6 more. Oh,
go on. Tell me who you want me to do, please.
Hold on a minute. The next 6 are... we are going to go with... I think
there were 3 more Bob Pearson stories.
There was.
If I'm not mistaken.
So we've got Les Briley.
That's a Bob.
Stuart Livermore.
Dave Livermore.
Of course it is. Marlon.
That's a Bob.
And Sean Hutchinson.
So Marlon Romeo, Sean Hutchinson, Ben Thompson, they were all well after Bob's retirement.
Yeah.
Excuse me, everyone. But Les, Moods, and Livers, they weren't signed as youth team players. It's a different string to Bob's bow, but all 3 of those came to the club because of the insistence of Bob Pearson that they were the right people, and I think he was proved right again. But
Indeed.
Our time always comes to an end, and Bob's retirement came through ill health. His eyesight failed, he was diabetic, and he was never quite the same towards the end of his time at Millwall. But my God, what a performance he put in while he was in his pomp. So I can't wait to tell you about those 3.
Indeed. So, thank you, Jeff, and join us next week when we will talk about Moody, Briley, Livers, Ben Thompson, Hutchinson and Romeo. Take care.
Can't wait. Okay, though. Goodbye, everybody.
I hope you enjoyed the chat between Jeff and Gary as much as I did. Next week, the second episode will focus on a further 6 memorable Lions. If you have someone you might like us to interview, give your reasons on an email addressed to nolutalkin@gmail.com. That's NOLUTALKIN without a G. nolutalkin@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we will play out for you to practice for the new season with the Wall of Sound.